Hi, I'm Dan from Melbourne Instruments in Melbourne, our hometown. We're a new synth audio technology maker, and this is Nina, our baby that we've been working on for 2 or 3 years. And Nina is a 12-voice analog polysynth module with a few new tricks that I want to show you. So let's go. So the first thing you'll see is that Nina's control panel is fully motorized. So if I automate via MIDI or I recall patches like this, then everything is where it should be. And the reason we've gone to the trouble of doing this is because we've lost touch with that original analog experience of playing something like an instrument, but we want to take that analog experience and bring it into the future. So we have the functionality of modern instruments and can make modern music and have, you know, a modern workflow, but still have that hand-ear coordination. Close your eyes, reach out, play something, feel it, and hear what you're doing. Really, the value of that becomes apparent as soon as you start playing Nina. Another great thing that Nina can do is have 2 different sounds loaded at the same time. So, for example, if I want to load in another sound here, I might try this one. Then I have A and B sounds. I can quickly jump between, and not only that, but I can morph between the 2 sounds. Which is a great expressive tool. It's a great way to smoothly transition between sounds in a performance, and it's a great way to find new, odd sounds for sound design, for cinematic purposes, and other things like that. On top of that, we have really, really extensive modulation capability. One of the great wishes with a lot of synthesizers is the ability to have something more like a modular workflow where you can take any source and send it to any destination. That's also a very difficult thing to do normally in terms of control, but on Nina, how we've done it is we have a modulation mode where now I can see how much of any source I'm sending to any destination. So for example, here I'll pick the LFO source and I can send some LFO to oscillator 1 shape, to oscillator 2 tune, to the cutoff, and that also makes it very easy to see all of my modulation. Even though I've got thousands of modulation paths and amounts, they're all really easy to find. It's really easy to just, you know, clear something. I can pick that and delete it, or I can see something and decide I want to have less of that. I can reverse engineer other presets by loading them up and then just looking through the modulation settings. Also, we have pretty decent modern connectivity. On the back, we've got 4 analog inputs, 4 analog outputs. The inputs can be used as CV or audio ins. The outputs, you get a stereo main pair and then 2 alternative outputs that can be used in a multi-timbral setup. There's a headphone out. There's MIDI in, out, and through, conventional DIN MIDI. There's also 2 USB ports for class-compliant USB MIDI controllers, so you can plug directly in without having to use any converters or go via a laptop or anything like that. There's also a USB-C port. that allows you to connect up Nina as a class-compliant device itself. So you can see Nina as a MIDI device from your DAW and record automation, playback automation, do all that kind of stuff directly. Across the top and inside, there are two analog VCOs. There's a wavetable, there's a noise source, which is a selectable noise type. Our VCF is a 4-pole transistor ladder like the classic Moogs, like we owe to Bob Moog. Especially on Nina, there's a extended range of drive where you can drive the filter really from perfectly smooth through to absolutely obliterated, which gives you a very, very intense voice level overdrive. There are two envelope generators, which you can assign via the modulation matrix any way that you want to. And the VCAs are stereo per voice, so you can smoothly pan each voice from left to right and actually beyond into stereo antiphase, which allows us to do this infinite panning trick that we came up with. Also, there are two LFOs. There's a few performance controls, switchable glide control that can switch between time-based glide and rate-based glide. There's a tempo control for the internal arpeggiator and step sequencer, and options for running voices in unison, running in poly mode or mono mode, with or without retriggering, and pretty much anything and everything that you want to do on a polysynth. Over here we have built-in effects, currently chorus, reverb and delay that are definitely beyond the kind of chorus and reverb and delay that you expect built into something like this. That's powered by the computer section over here, which gives us access to many more parameters and things that if you want to deep dive, you want to change the types of envelopes that you have, you want to change the type of glide, you want to tweak the parameters of the reverb and things like that. That's all quickly accessible and software defined. So as time passes, we can keep building and extending on that. Downloading presets and updates and anything like that is going to be super easy. As for presets, you can store thousands and dial through them really fast, just punching up the first 16 or more. Across the bottom panel, there's 127 per bank and a large number of banks, and selectable via MIDI, of course. But most importantly, how does it sound? Okay, now, Nina's oscillators. We've designed these from the ground up, and they're a fully discrete circuit that, instead of switching or blending between the various primitive waveforms, triangles, sawtooth, square, etc., what we actually do is we've made a variable shape triangle that you can morph between a sawtooth and a triangle shape. For example, if I give you a single oscillator here, here's a basic triangle, and if I start adjusting the shape control, we're slowly tilting the shape of that triangle into a sawtooth. That gives you a lot of unusual timbres in between that you can't get just by blending sawtooths and triangles. Then on top of that, you can blend from the variable shaped triangle through to a square wave. That's a 50-50 square. That's pulse width modulation. Of course, all of these parameters are modulatable via the modulation matrix. And on oscillator 1, you also have the ability to drop the square wave down an octave. So there's your sub-octave there, and you can dial between the triangular shape and the sub-octave. You also have a hard sync on the second oscillator. So that's just rubbing the two together. This is synchronized. On top of that, we've got a wavetable oscillator. Select your shape. You can have technically thousands of shapes to pick from. So if I dial this up, I can pick shapes like that. And there's a noise source. The noise I can select between white noise, pink noise, external input, or a special kind of ring modulated harmonic fuzz sound that comes from the first two oscillators. That's what that sounds like. This is with the white noise. With the filter, I've got a drive control that allows me to turn up how much all of the sources I'm running into the filter at once. Currently, I've got it set really smooth, so there's no real distortion. But if I start to crank that up, you can hear the white noise being modulated. There's an overdrive button that gives me another 10 or more dB of gain on the drive control to get really ridiculously thick sounds. And that's voice level, so you can have up to 12 voices doing that all at once. Also, the control of the filter, the oscillator tuning is incredibly high res. It feels and sounds exactly like analog. There's no steppiness. And also, we can, on the fly, switch controls into quantized control to give you 4 octaves of tuning range, or down to the cents, plus or minus a fifth. That's for all 3 octaves. So there it is, and that's really only scratching the surface, so stay tuned for more, and thanks NoiseGate for having us, and thanks for watching.